Jake, welcome to the Exodus podcast. How's it going?
Jake, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. It's going well.
Yeah,
How about yourself?
it's going good. We're talking about some news here in the world of trail cameras. We don't get a ton of news, and unfortunately, most of the news we get is things that I would say are not. They're a little polarizing. So I guess we get to talk about what's going on. But before we get into that, um, I know you are originally from New York. You moved to Ohio to chase whitetails, and so that tells anyone how serious you are about hunting to literally move partially away across the country. But go ahead and introduce yourself for people who aren't familiar with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show, man. I appreciate it. My name is Jake Bush. I'm originally from southwestern New York. I moved to Ohio 5 years ago, and I've been just chasing bucks around the hills ever since. There's been a lot of highs, a lot of lows, but overall, it's been a great experience, and I've met a ton of awesome people, and I get to be on podcasts like this, so it's been
Yeah.
great.
So what initially provoked you to move from New York to Ohio? That's a big move.
It is a big move. It's crazy, man. Honestly, my grandpa passed away, and when I was growing up, he used to film me. Like I have all that old footage
That's
that
cool.
someday I'm gonna make a film with. But after he passed, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of getting sick of. I had like a 30-acre little hobby farm that I bought in New York, and I was like, I kind of want to go chase bigger deer, and I just want to have more adventure again. Like I just had that sense of adventure. I lived in Montana for 4 years in the Air Force and got to explore the Bob Marshall Wilderness and all the mountains out there. And I was like, I kind of miss that. So had a bunch of different options. I put in for jobs in Iowa, Wisconsin, and Ohio. And I was actually in Wisconsin interviewing for a job when I got the call about the Ohio one. And it just set up to where it would give me more time to hunt. And it's as crazy as that. Like, what's a job that will pay for what I want to do and give me the most amount of time off? And that's how I chose it. And it was 12-hour night shift, but I got to scout every other day throughout the year, and that's
Mhm.
all I needed.
That's really cool. Do you wish you would have got a job in Iowa instead of Ohio? I have to ask that question.
Oh, I actually interviewed for a job about a year after being here, and it was out by Dubuque, like
Mhm.
that northeastern
Yep.
section of Iowa. And it's about like it's the probably the best place to be if you ask me, because you have Wisconsin across the border, that
Mhm.
southeastern section of Minnesota, Illinois is right there. You're
Yep.
kind of in that perfect area. But to be honest with you, man, I like where I'm at. I would say the density is probably lower here
Mhm.
overall. Like, I might see yeah, I might see, let's say, 10 bucks in 70 days in the woods,
Mhm.
but 6 of those bucks here are gonna be over 150 inches. And so it's like, well, it has its pros and cons for sure, but overall, no, I'm happy I'm here. It sets up well with the family life, and obviously, I've started a family, I bought a home and everything else, so it's been a
Mhm.
great move.
That's cool. Yeah. What's kind of ironic is people would think, okay, Iowa, they think cornfield. That part of Iowa is probably more rugged than where you're at in Ohio, probably by twofold, maybe.
Yeah, it's, higher floor to ceiling for sure, and it's definitely rugged up there. It's basically hill country. Like, that's the allure for me, is finding hill country areas. I love that chase in the hills.
Uh-huh. Why is that?
So for me, I think it's like the physical demand of it and the mental demand of it as well. Right now, for example, it's December 5th today. I've been chasing the buck I'm after since late September, and I've went up and down these hills like 60 or 70 times at this point. And I just, it's taken everything in me to just keep going. And there's weeks where you're like, man, you know what? I'm kind of burned out, but then you hit the reset button and you clear your mind, and then you go back after it again. And for me, when I can do all that and really push myself and challenge myself, and then it finally happens, it's like winning the Super Bowl. There's
Yeah.
just nothing better for me. And so, whatever it takes to feel that, I think is what you should do. And everybody's going to have a little bit different answer.
Now I want to talk about late season, and I think this is top of mind for everyone that has a tag in their pocket. And I think that we were talking before. I mean, late season can be very straightforward for certain parts of the country, or depending on what your opportunity is, it can be very cut and dry. Be very methodical with your sits, be very methodical with your access, and try to time things correctly with a good cold front. But I have to imagine that that's maybe not quite what you have to do with the type of terrain that you're hunting. So just give me an idea of what is your late season plans as of right now.
So, late season for me is I get into the late season mindset probably about December 15th. And the reason for that is, from running cameras, one thing that I've figured out over the last 5 years, especially in the state of Ohio, is we're looking at it now. I mean, December 5th today, but I started seeing it yesterday. So December 4th, the day after gun season, for about a 10-day period, it seems like the biggest, most mature bucks get up on their feet and they're looking for that last doe. It
Mhm.
might take a couple days after gun season for everything to calm down. They realize the pressure's gone and they feel comfortable moving again. But there's a window of opportunity for some really good rut action there. And, early morning, midday, mid afternoon, I'm seeing it all with some of the biggest bucks of the year. And so I'm still going to be rut hunting for the next 10 days.
Okay.
Now, that's gonna start changing quickly, but I'm gonna give it, I've got a couple terrain features right outside bedding areas on the downwind side that basically I've been sitting the same couple of trees all year for this deer on the outskirts. I shot over his back. I'll have to show you the video. He it was 35, so it was far, but my bow goes off and he ducks like 15 inches and I missed his back by an inch, maybe. I
Gosh.
mean, I thought I nailed him and it was just what it shot right over his back. So,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna do that same thing. I'm gonna stick to the rut tactics for a little bit longer. I think that any sort of good terrain feature, any sort of bedding area, you could have one of those does come back into heat again on this cycle if they weren't bred the first time. And if you're in the right area, you're going to have some good hunts. So that's what I'm focused on right now. And then my mind is
Real quick,
shifting.
real quick. From November rut hunting to December rut hunting, what changes from there? Is
To
it
be honest
some
with
of the
you,
same things?
it's basically the same thing for me. Like you could get into food sources with the does a little bit more. Like if you have a cold snap, for example, or you get some snow. My brother in New York got like 18 inches of snow the other day.
Wow.
Well, that cold snap is going to push those does onto food. And then the bucks are going to be closer to food for the does. They're still going to be monitoring those does, in my opinion, anyways. So if we get a good cold snap, I'm looking at what bedding area is the closest to a late season food source. And for me right now, basically the only late season food source that I'm going to have down here in the big woods is chestnut oaks. And so chestnut oaks typically they like soil that has a lot of drainage in it that runs off very well. So it's like normally on the spine of the ridges. So with all my scouting I've done this year and then early season, I was identifying those chestnut oaks every time I'd walk on them. It's like walking on big footballs basically on the
Mhm.
ground. And I just, every time I'd mark them down, late season food source. And I just kept marking those. So I can look at my map now and say, okay, I've been targeting this buck on these 3 or 4 bedding areas on these terrain features. The greatest likelihood of the most amount of does is gonna be on this specific, spur ridge that had chestnut oaks. So I'm gonna target that bedding area and that terrain feature a little bit more.
Mhm.
And so that's basically the only thing is I will focus on food if the weather permits food-focused hunting, just because I think the bucks are gonna be where the does are at.
Sure. How challenging is access during this time of year too?
Man, it
Because I
is.
just think that's the hardest. I mean, I've never hunted down there, but I'm just picturing in my head, okay, this is the food source. More than likely, the does aren't bedded too far off of that food
Yeah.
source, and you got to get in there somehow.
Man, it is the most challenging thing hands down. And this is the whole season, but it becomes very prevalent when you're out there late season because
So
you can
open,
and you can
dead
hear
calm.
and see them run off. Like they're
Yep.
doing this all year round. But like for example, the chestnut oaks are on top of the ridge and I want to hunt that it's a saddle. It's actually two saddles and then there's two hogsbacks that meet right on the transition of a clear cut. And it's like a X marks the spot with 10 trails. So I have to get up there, but they're feeding on the spine of that ridge. They can see my headlamp coming for 600 or 700 yards. And then they can hear me. And early season, crunchy leaves, I don't know what that travels. Like if I'm very methodical and I'm, rolling my foot very slow and taking, 30 seconds to a minute per step and just saying, okay, I got to go 60 yards. I got an hour to get 60 yards to the tree. The crunchy leaves sound isn't traveling that far. But late season, what I've noticed, and this is just from spending a lot of time in the woods, is for example, I'm on a spur ridge, right? Last year, chasing this deer I'm after this year.
Hmm.
And 5 to 600 yards away, there's another spur ridge. And I sit down, I'm collecting myself, taking my time. I always like to sit down and just kind of listen for a little bit to see what's going on. And then if there's a deer focused on me, maybe he changes his focus. And so I'm sitting there and I hear a deer walking. And I'm like, where is this deer at? And I'm, glassing close and I can't find it. Well, eventually, after like 5 minutes, I work my way out to that 500-yard mark, and it's a doe just feeding on that adjacent spur ridge. Just, I mean, just milling around, walking, and I could hear her clear as day from 500 yards crunching leaves.
Jeez.
And I remember I was just sitting there and I was like, I just need to go. I just need to get off this ridge right now because there is no way that I'm going to be able to get close enough to that deer to pull this off. And so, with the rut tactics I got for the next 10 days, the point I was trying to get at there is I feel like I still have an opportunity to just walk into some of these spots and get set up because there's a lot of travel happening still. But after that December 15th roughly time frame, when they just start going bed to food and the bed is normally the best bedding close to food, like let's say they're traveling 150 or 200 yards in daylight. Well, to get that close, it's very, very difficult. And so the thing that I've started doing a lot is everybody's situation's different and maybe you have good access or you have grass or a logging road that's fresh dirt or something that can help your access. What I had to do last year with the crunchy leaves is I would actually go in at like 2 or 3 in the morning and I would sit that spot all day for the afternoon hunt. Like I would know I'm
Holy
not going to see him in the morning. Like maybe I see him in the morning, but
sure.
he's going to J hook way low.
Uh-huh.
And I would make sure my wind was off of that J hook so he didn't smell me. And I'd sit there all day. I'd take a nap midday at the base of the tree. And then about 2:30, 3 o'clock, I'd get up and get ready. Everything's already hung up from the morning, but I'd finally climb back up in the stand and get ready. And that's how I ended up having the encounter with that buck last year with no antlers was that I mean, I would just all day sits just to hunt the afternoon.
Oh,
And it becomes really difficult. I mean, the headlamp thing is huge, even if you have a red light. Like I just you're still a light. And I can like if somebody else is out there, I can see their headlamp and their light going across the ridge. And then I can always hear them.
mhm.
And so it's a very difficult thing to pull off. I feel like if you get the access right, or if you figure out a way to make the access work, you can have some really great sits because the deer become probably the most patternable that they are all year under the right circumstances because the food becomes extremely limited. The bedding cover is extremely limited. They're pushed into pockets from pressure and everything else. And so all you have to do is figure out a way to get in between point A and point B, capitalize. It's just hard to actually get to the tree without blowing them out of there. That's the number one thing that's always going through my head is how can I get to this tree?
Yeah. So just to reiterate, that's nuts. You go in at like 2 or 3 in the morning, hang your set, hunt through the morning, and then get to the base of the tree, take a nap. So, dude, that's crazy.
I wake up so cold. Like last year, there was days where I was in the teens and I'm doing that. And at the base of the tree, like I was in this one triple tree, big chestnut oak, and I knew that he was coming off his bed and passing that tree at like 18 yards. So I get down to take the midday nap and there's a little sunspot and I made sure my feet were in that sunspot to keep them warm. But when I woke up like 2 hours later, my feet weren't in the sunspot anymore and they were
Uh-huh.
frozen solid. I just remember thinking like, man, my toes are gonna fall off out here. Like this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But when he came in, I was like, holy cow, it worked.
It
Like this
worked.
is an actual tactic that can be utilized
Yeah.
if you just it's almost kind of fun. It comes back to that like twisted mind of like
Sure.
wanting the hardest hunt possible, but like trying to just survive the elements on top of kill the deer is
Right.
kind of fun to me too. So I have that aspect of it.
Yeah. Have you? I mean, could you just pack in like a sleeping bag or something for the midday nap?
Yeah. I've thought about it. I've thought about taking the Kafaru. I've got the 4400 mag. I'm
Hmm.
like, man, maybe I just pack it up like I'm going in the backcountry and just put
Yeah.
a sleeping bag in there. And I've actually thought about just like getting a green or camo colored sleeping bag, just kind of wearing it all day. That way you don't have to take as many clothes in with you,
Yeah.
because like I look ridiculous walking through the woods late season with my stand and my pack, and then I've got all my gear hung off the back because I changed my base layers and my socks and everything when I get to the tree on
Hmm.
those cold days just so because I'm sweaty because it's like
Hmm.
2 mile access at that point in the year.
Dude, that's pretty crazy. I think there's not a lot of people willing to do that, and I think that's a testament to your level of focus on trying to get a late season buck. And so I think, and that's just the funny thing too, is because go other parts of the country, late seasons their best and arguably easiest hunting because you're in a blind more than likely. You're probably not going very far, and so that's just kind of funny that the the tale of two cities of different hunting styles for late season. But I mean, it's clear that there's opportunity there.
Yeah, it's such a mind game because you see these patterns and you're like, I can kill that deer. I just have to get there.
Yeah,
Like, I have to be able to get to that deer, and that's just it. I've become very creative. It's
that's
almost
very
like
great.
being an artist with trying to figure out how to access. Like, hey, can I come up this weird hog's back? Or hey, they logged this spot this year. Well, the road up on top that they logged that they were driving their skidders on is dirt, and so there's not a lot of leaves. So if
Mhm.
I walk that road, I can navigate a lot of these areas and get sub 100 yards, 150 yards without ever stepping on a leaf.
Yeah.
And, just little things like that, trying to figure it out. But yeah, it's fun, man. It's definitely fun.
Is there any other key things that you think maybe would be beneficial for someone that's trying to get a late season buck in that type of terrain? Because there's a lot of we have a lot of listeners that focus on this type of hunting. So I guess you're the source of information right now.
So I would say just dial in your food sources first and foremost. And if you don't have them, to me, it's worth if I don't have that intel of that food source, the one that they're actively feeding on. Like I can say, hey, there's chestnut oaks on all these ridges. What I like to do is I like to take the same approach I take shed hunting. I'll get up, I'll find the elevation it seems like they're feeding on, and I'll just walk as fast as I can, just speed scout through it all and just burn a day of just like kind of burning that area up, not
Mhm.
intruding in the bedding at all, but just burn it all up. And what I like to look for in the hills is you can see it from hundreds of yards away normally, but you'll be walking along and then all of a sudden you look up and there's whether it's a red oak or a chestnut oak, you'll just see the leaves completely turned upside down. It looks like turkeys are feeding on it. Well, if you walk up to it and there's a bunch of deer poop all over the place, it's deer, not turkeys. And sometimes it's even deer and turkeys.
Mhm.
But that's where I find the majority of my sheds. Like I've had a couple years down here where I found 50 plus antlers just under that exact same thing, where they're just turning up those leaves under that. It's like a specific oak or like a specific grove of oaks normally.
Mhm.
And so once you identify those, I mean, you're going to be really close because those normally there's not a lot of that going on. And then it's a matter of looking at the leaves and saying, okay, they're still moist. The dirt underneath is moist. It's not drying out yet. There's, fresh poop. I can see some fresh tracks. You have to, it's like finding a rubber or scrape. You have to identify how long it's been since they were there and is it still active or not. And if it's still active, you've got a great place to start. And maybe you throw an observation sit at it to see, if you're picky, well, hey, what deer is here? Or throw a cell cam on it if you have service.
There you go.
There we go. That's a guaranteed kill, right? But
You're right. Right.
what I like to do is sit like an adjacent spur ridge and I'll glass. I'll just glass over there. That's actually how we ended up killing the Kansas buck was more glassing. I feel like glassing is you want to talk about efficiency. Like if you have the ability to glass wherever you're at, get creative with it. And if you can identify a pattern through your glass or like the attitude of a specific deer, that helps you out tremendously.
Mhm.
So identify the food source, try to pick up on the pattern, whether it's a camera or glassing, and then capitalize on the right day. If it's an area where they're traveling more than a couple hundred yards and you're concerned about if they're going to get there before day or before dark or not, I would try to time a front. And this is me learning from the godfather of the hills, Heath Cisco down here. He's taking me under his wing a little bit, but you've talked to Heath. He's a huge
Mhm.
front guy.
Mhm.
And I've just seen it so many times. Like this year, it's funny. The day he killed his buck, I remember the day before the front rolled out, I was like, Heath would be hunting tomorrow night. And then he posted the picture of his buck. And I was like, I knew he was gonna be out there. I
Yep.
like he's a master at it. And I've noticed that same pattern. If you have some precipitation rolling through and it's gonna stop with a couple hours left in the night, pressure's gonna raise up a little bit and it's cold and crisp. I mean, you're gonna be where you need to be probably. And so that's kind of what I look for. Last year, learn from one of my mistakes. I found this deer that I'm still chasing this year, and I hunted him every day I could, regardless of conditions. I'd figure out a way to get close and be on the fringes and figure it out. And I think I probably pressured him a little more than I should have just by
Mhm.
being around. And maybe he didn't step over my boot tracks because I was careful of that, but maybe he saw my headlamp or he just knew somebody was in the area. Where if I would have, after talking to Heath, actually, if I would have waited for like the perfect condition days after I established that pattern, I probably would have had an opportunity before I did when
Mhm.
he still had antlers on his head. So, yeah, I would just try to establish that pattern. I feel like if it's, these food sources like chestnut oaks, for example, if they're feeding on them like January 1st, I've seen that same grove of chestnut oaks continue to be hot all the way through shed season.
I was going to
So
ask that. How long? Like, what's the half life of some of these, you know, key areas?
it depends. If it's a single tree, not as long typically, unless it's one deer feeding on it, which is more than possible as well. But if it's a grove of them, they seem to last until their antlers fall off. It's just typically the way it works here.
Mhm. So that's a key piece of information then for someone to go in and try to find that grove. It's just finding the magic food source at that point, quite literally, because there isn't a ton of food. I have to imagine, and it takes the time just to find a place. Because gosh, I imagine you could waste a lot of time if you do
Oh,
not identify that. Like that seems to be step one. Period.
it definitely is. I mean, if you were to just go in and throw observation sits on different ridges or anything like that, you could be miles away from the active food source. And if it's the right food source, all the deer could be there, or 95% of them could
Sure.
be there. And that's like I've walked up on ridges down here before and found 8 to 10 fresh antlers laying within 100 yards.
Yeah.
And that's because all of the bucks are just feeding on that one food source. And if you're, a mile over, just throwing observation sets, you're just wasting your time. So for me, my tactic is always going to be after December 15th, find the food and then locate what deer is on that food. If it's the right deer, establish the pattern and then figure out how to access to kill.
Hmm. That's excellent advice. Where would you rank late season hunting? So you have, let's just break it down. We have early season. We have what's this called pre-rut, late October. We have the first half of November, the second half of November. We're getting pretty linear here. We have the first half of December because it seems like you like that area. And then we have
Yeah.
late season. So we have six different things here. Out of those six, where does late season fall in your level of excitement for chasing whitetails?
Number 2. And it's number 2 because I've had a ton of success the first, like, 5 days of season just because I have a lot of time to establish those patterns,
Sure.
and then I'm the first person to induce pressure on them.
Hmm.
So, if I'm the first person into that area on a good pattern, I just feel very dangerous like that. And then late October, I established some good patterns, but it seems like the bucks that I'm after just they never read the script for me. I struggle late October quite a bit. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of deer that I could probably go kill, but when I'm after the deer,
Sure.
seems like that just normally isn't my time.
Okay.
Um, November is very tough for me. I'm probably the worst rut hunter you've ever had on the podcast, to be honest with you. I This year I'm proud of myself. I learned a lot from Ryan Glitsky about patience and sitting a
Yeah.
specific tree and just grinding it out. And I sat in the same tree over and over and over and over, and then I finally had an opportunity that buck shot over his back. So it's tough for me to do though. I like being aggressive and making those moves
Hmm.
and finding all the things that I need to beat that deer. And late season offers that, and it, in my opinion, offers the best pattern all year. Like
Hmm.
the patterns late season are definitely, I would say, better than early season in the hills. You just have to be able to access. That's the difficult part of the equation to that point.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's no matter where you're at in late season. There's usually more eyeballs. There's more deer, and there's okay. So all of the leaves are gone. All like it's just open and naked, and you got to figure out a way to get in there and also get out, which is a huge challenge.
And they don't put up with as much either. They
Yeah,
start getting really finicky about pressure.
yeah, definitely. Is there anything else you can think of for late season? I think those are some really good, tangible pieces of advice for someone out there with a tag in their pocket. Is there any other thing that really comes to mind here?
I would say from it's the mental side of it, and like we're pretty late in the game now. I've been going since late September in Ohio, and then since early September in Kentucky, and so it's been a grind. And I think taking like poor weather or poor factor days off to reset your mind, spend time with the family, eat a steak, eat good, get a workout in, just get feeling good again, and then go in with the right mind. The last thing that you want to do late season is develop this repeatable pattern where you're just
Easy
like,
to get
you're,
lazy. People start to
yeah,
get lazy.
exactly. And you're almost like a zombie too. You're not, like, that's a perfect example. I could be like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna hunt down low today. I'm not gonna climb that ridge, that 400-foot ridge, because I don't wanna have to do that. Like, I'm gonna get all sweaty. I'm already tired. My back hurts from carrying a stand all season and blah, blah, blah." Well, I'm probably not gonna kill that deer. And
Mhm.
so just staying in the right frame of mind is one of the most important things to me. And the other thing too is, for me anyways, I let go of expectations, and I've figured that out. Like, I figured out how to do that with my entire season. Like, I'm just at the point where it doesn't matter if I kill or not, man, to be honest with you. I find enjoyment out of other things in the woods.
Mhm.
Like, I have solitude, I have challenge, I have get to see awesome sunrises and sunsets and get to explore, and so I focus on those things more than I focus on the kill.
Mhm.
And if I was hyper focused on the kill and I'm frustrated at the fact that I'm not getting it done and I'm failing and everything else, you're just gonna spiral downhill.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like I've tried very hard to stay level-headed, to not have expectations for myself or feel like anybody else has expectations for me. Sometimes we all fall in you get on social media and people have just been laying them down this year, right? It's been a banner year for a lot of guys.
Mhm.
Well, if you feel competition towards that, you're gonna eat yourself alive. And so the thing for me is, like, once again, it comes back to the cell cam debate. It's hunt your own hunt, do it for the right reasons for you and just stay in your own lane. And I think that you're just gonna be able to go the distance.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I also think I had this thought too. A lot of really good deer hunters. I think so and so didn't shoot a buck this year. It's like, dude, you don't know what deer they passed. Like it was not from lack of opportunity in reality, or it's because they were so set on a specific goal. And it's like you can't judge a dude for holding true to what they really want to do. And I think there's a lot of hunters that maybe don't notch their tag, but it does not take away any level of their ability as a deer. I still think they're great deer hunters, and I think maybe that's a short circuited thought for some other people, but I don't know. I just know a lot of deer hunters that don't necessarily kill deer every year, but I know that they pass a lot of really, really, really great deer that 99% of the population would shoot too. So it's like that's something just to keep in mind too as the season starts to wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, I passed early November, I passed a 155-inch 10 point at 25 yards. I
Yeah, no one's
actually
passing that
passed
deer.
him twice because the deer I'm after is just he's just insane, man. I hope I get to show him to you. It would
Yeah,
be, it'd be awesome, but yeah, I mean, it's just everybody's got their own hunt, and that's you just
exactly
gotta
right.
do what you're out there for.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Well, is there anything else you can think of?
I think it's been great, man, to be honest with you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some really good key takeaways for late season and even for the next 10 days for hunting. I checked my cell camera on my web browser when we were talking, and there's a couple bucks in there. I was like, oh man, they're moving around. And
I
so,
love it, man, love it.
where can people find what else you have going on?
So over at Latitude Outdoors, we do have the Grit series, we have the In Session series, and the In Session podcast, and then you can find me on Instagram at the Jake Bush.
Yeah, I have to say I have really enjoyed the Grit series on YouTube. It feels like a very fresh breath of air for that type of content. Where I was watching, like, man, because a lot whether it's right or wrong, a lot of times you watch a hunting clip or video or something like that, they all kind of feel the same. I was like, this feels
Yeah.
completely different. I really, really, really like that. So you guys have done an excellent job.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of creative guys over there that have worked on that. They're kind of masterminds. I just sit back and let it happen, man. So
Yeah,
that's all them, but they have done a great job for sure.
100%. Well, thank you so much, Jake. Good luck the rest of the season. Hope to see this conclude in a positive fashion, and if not, I'm sure you'll sharpen your blade and get a little bit better too.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Thanks for having me on, Jake. I appreciate it.